Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for the Council of State Governments Justice Center focused on improving outcomes for young adults in the justice system. I'm Emily Morgan, and I'm really excited to be joined by three great panelists to talk about this important topic. We have 90 minutes today, so we'll be presenting for about 60 of those minutes and hope to have a lot of opportunity for question and answers at the end. So to just briefly introduce our panelists, we first have Gabe Pizzello from the San Francisco Adult Probation Department, who will be talking to us about specialized caseload for transitional age youth. We have Alejandra Martinez from CHOC San Francisco, who's going to speak about her experience as a young person involved in the justice system. And then we have Molly Baldwin from ROCA Inc., who's going to speak about kind of strategies to engage young adults, and particularly around employment and education. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping questions, or housekeeping items rather. For the question and answer portion, if you can enter your questions into the chat box, we will sift through those and hopefully get to as many as we can. Secondly, if you have any difficulty with the online platform, you can contact the WebEx helpline, and the number is provided. And then finally, this webinar, as well as the slides, the PowerPoint slides that will be used, will be archived on the CSG Justice Center website a couple days following this webinar. So to get started, I'm going to provide a little bit of context for why young adults require a distinct approach, kind of some examples of where states are starting to think about tailoring their responses to young adults, and then provide some recommendations for states and locals to continue to improve outcomes for young adults, drawing from an issue brief that the Council of State Governments Justice Center released in November. So just to give a brief overview of who we are, we're the CSG Justice Center. We're a national nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization that represents all three branches of government, and we provide practical policy, advice, and guidance to improve public safety and strengthen communities. So first of all, why do criminal and juvenile justice leaders need to focus in on this population of young adults? We know from the limited data that's available that young adults are disproportionately likely to commit serious offenses and to have continued involvement in the justice system. Here are just some brief statistics, and again, based on very limited data, but we know that the young adults accounted for nearly 30% of arrests, nearly 20% of incarcerated juveniles, more than 21% of prison admissions in 2012, and that they are significantly likely to have kind of continued involvement, through rearrest or reincarceration. So it's certainly a public safety issue to focus in on young adults in the justice system, and then based on developmental research and the growing body of brain and developmental research, we know that young adults are developmentally distinct from youth and older adults, and that significant brain development continues well into a person's 20s. So we know that young adults kind of represent this unique stage in life where they're not quite youth, but not quite adults yet, and they're more susceptible, for example, to peer pressure, more likely to engage in risky behavior than younger youth. But at the same time, they're more impulsive and less able to kind of control their emotions than older adults, and therefore they really require a distinct approach, and it's important that interventions to address some of the kind of criminal thinking and antisocial behavior of young adults who have involvement in the justice system, that those responses need to be tailored to these distinct developmental needs. We also know that young adults have additional needs. Here are just a couple examples. First, around education, we know often that young adults are overage and undercredited, and that the traditional education system is therefore not really well set up to meet their needs. In terms of employment, we know that young adults often don't have the skills necessary to find and maintain employment, and they often have little or no job experience, so that makes finding a job really, really difficult beyond just their involvement in the justice system. We also know that they have acute behavioral health needs, so we know a significant proportion of individuals in the juvenile and criminal justice systems have a mental health disorder, substance use disorder, or co-occurring disorders, and we know that certain conditions emerge during this time and that substance use peaks during young adulthood, and so they're sort of trying to manage these conditions, and we need to really be thinking about how best to set up the system and our services and supervision to better support young adults in this fashion. And then finally, they're transitioning to independence, and so they're sort of expected to become adults and be self-sufficient, even though they may not have had the opportunity to kind of ease into that transition. And this time is a time when family relationships or relationships with caring adults are really important to help them navigate this transition, and we know that they often don't have the support system in place. So fortunately, there are a growing number of states and local communities that are starting to think about young adults in a different way and sort of tailor approaches to them. Here are just a couple examples from across the country. The first is around kind of youthful offender policies that protect young adults from the consequences of a criminal conviction. And so, whether it's record expungement or, things like that, they put into place these policies so that young adults aren't don't unnecessarily come into contact and have those collateral consequences of a criminal conviction. At the same time, places are establishing specialized probation and parole caseloads for young adults, and we'll hear more about this from some of our speakers today. And then some states have created or are considering creating separate facilities for young adults. And so kind of thinking through what that looks like. We know also that there are places that have specialized courts and specialized sentencing structures and things like that. And so we know that this is an issue that sort of is percolating across the country. However, we also know at the same time that several barriers continue to exist for improving outcomes for young adults. First, most evidence-based approaches haven't been well tested for young adults. So while there's limited research on kind of what works for youth, and we know there's a lot of what works for adults, this population kind of stands out, and approaches haven't necessarily been well tested for them. Secondly, young adults are also aging out of key protective networks. So, for example, the compulsory age of education ends by age 18. Healthcare coverage or Medicaid coverage between youth and adults changes at age 19. Foster care in most states, youth age out of foster care at 21, and so they're potentially aging out of these networks and systems at the same time, and these systems are often operating in silos and not communicating with each other. Third, we know that young adults are disproportionately impacted by collateral consequences around education and employment and housing. They may not be eligible for student loans and financial aid or certain jobs or certain housing areas, and this impacts them disproportionately, often because they're just starting out in life and they're really trying to kind of get themselves back on track, and encountering these barriers is really problematic. And finally, we know that systems aren't tracking outcomes for young adults, and so they don't necessarily even know what's happening to these young people. They're not collecting data on recidivism. Most states, pretty much all states, aren't really necessarily collecting data on education and employment in a systematic way. And they're not examining this data by age. And so, we really need states to kind of think about how they're collecting data and how this information can be used to inform their approaches moving forward. So as I mentioned, in November, the Justice Center released an issue brief on reducing recidivism and improving other outcomes for young adults in the juvenile and adult criminal justice system. It kind of goes through some of what I've already talked about in terms of why young adults are distinct, what their distinct needs are, what research is and is not available on what works to meet those needs, and then provides recommendations to address some of those gaps and some of those areas of continued need. So I just wanted to walk quickly through the recommendations and then kind of leave folks with some questions kind of to grapple with or think about when developing policies and different interventions to support young adults. So our first recommendation is around tailoring supervision and services to address young adults' distinct needs. So we know there's not a lot of research out there, but from the limited information that's available, we know that these elements should be included in a strategy to support young adults. So we know that cognitive behavioral approaches work for both youth and adults, and so they should really be part of the strategy for young adults. In addition, addressing some of those key needs that I talked about around education, employment, mental and behavioral health, family involvement, and life skills. Our second recommendation is around reducing barriers across service systems. So given that young adults in the justice system are often involved in multiple other service systems, the education system, child welfare system, to just name a few, really need to kind of first of all think about ensuring that each individual service system provides as much of a safety net for young adults as possible, but then also looking across systems and making sure that there's consistency and kind of coordination across, particularly around endpoints for care and kind of continued support. And then also thinking about what collateral consequences, what laws and policies are in place that impose those consequences on young adults, and how can those policies potentially be amended to reduce the negative impact on young adults. The third recommendation is around improving data collection and reporting. So as I mentioned, there's not a lot of data available on young adults. So to address this gap, we need to make sure that states and local communities are collecting information on the number of young adults in the justice system, as well as detailed recidivism data and other outcome data disaggregated by key variables. And also then, because young adults are involved in the juvenile and adult justice systems, think about ways to improve data sharing across these systems so that we better understand how youth are sort of engaging in each system and how often they return. And finally, our recommendation is to continue to build the knowledge base. We need to know more about what works. And so that kind of is a twofold piece. First of all, for the few existing programs that are available, we need to support rigorous evaluation to make sure that those programs that are being implemented are actually having the intended results and the positive results that we want for young adults. At the same time, developing and testing new and innovative models to support young adults, and then using findings from those studies to inform policy, practice, and resource allocation. So just a couple of kind of key considerations for justice systems when you're thinking about what to do to reduce recidivism for young adults. There are kind of 5 key buckets. These are sort of kind of things to think about around, what are court policies and practices, and how do those need to be adjusted to support young adults. Thinking about supervision of young adults, both youth who are incarcerated as well as youth who are on community supervision. Thinking about the services and the delivery of services, who's providing those services, what are those services, and so on. Thinking about state policies, to address those kind of cross-system coordination issues, and then around data. We thought these might be helpful kind of starting points for some conversations around young adults that are, we're beginning to see across the country. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Thank you again, and please feel free to visit our website. You can access that issue brief on our website, csgjusticecenter.org, in the youth area. And with that, I will turn it over to Gabe Pizzello from the San Francisco Adult Probation Department, who's going to speak with us about the specialized caseload for transitional age youth. Gabe?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to talk a little bit first about the Tei Unit and just give you an understanding of how it's set up. We currently have 9 officers designated to the transitional age youth caseloads. We have 3 Spanish-speaking officers, and 1 officer is bilingual in Samoan. We try to keep our caseloads low. We try to top them off between 45 and 50. Right now we're currently over that. The breakdown of the population is 82% male, 18% female, and they're assigned based on risk level. Currently, there are approximately 60% of our clients are high risk, 22 being medium risk, and 18% being low risk. The criteria for the unit is, they have to be 18 to 25. They can't be diagnosed with a serious mental illness, and they cannot have a sex offense or a domestic violence related charge. There are an estimated 8,000 Tei age youth in San Francisco. Of those, approximately 500 are on supervision with the Adult Probation Department. The officers we try to hire and look for are officers that are, experienced case managers, officers who are experienced in building professional alliance with not only the clients but the service providers as well. And their strength is building strong relationships with the communities. With this population, not only do we deal with impulsivity, but when you layer childhood trauma, poor parenting, victimization, homelessness, it makes this a very difficult population to supervise. The caseloads are set up based on risk. We have 7 high-risk caseloads. We have a low-risk caseload, and we're working on how to better distribute the workload. On top of that, we have specific culturally sensitive caseloads. We have a Pacific Islander caseload and a gender-responsive caseload to deal with those specific needs. Cases are mostly basically assigned on the risk. Our high-risk officers are responsible for meeting with the clients twice a month, referring them to cognitive-based therapies, really getting into the homes and trying to develop a family-focused approach. We are right now in the process of 2 major mayor's office-led initiatives. One is our young adult court, which provides extra judicial oversight for the population, and the other is our mayor's office IPO, interrupt, predict, and organize. And I'll talk a little with you about those programs. The YAC court started mid last year, and it was meant to improve the outcomes of this population. The criteria for that is, at least the referrals come from 2 different streams. One from the defense counsel. They can be referred to the court through the Defense Council, but also the Probation Department has 15 allotted slots for our most severe cases, cases that have suffered numerous motions to revoke. They have serious violent charges, and you know, they're just in need of additional support. They go to court and they are assisted through a case manager through the Family Service Agency. If they are referred through the Defense Council, if they're referred through the Adult Probation Department, we assist them with case management through a provider, through the Leaders in Community Alternatives provider. They provide one-on-one case management services. They're a resource broker as well. The IPO program, the Interrupt, Predict, and Organize program, is a program designed to develop life skills and employment skills of some of the most at-risk youth under our supervision. They go through a intensive job readiness training component. Once they're selected, after that component, they are put in civil service positions as part-time employees. They're paid for 32 hours a week. 24 of those hours are actual job site work through the Department of Public Health, Park and Rec, and so the other 4 hours are dedicated to mental health services and educational development. We meet once a week to case manage and case conference people who need a little more intervention, a little more services. We have a dedicated probation officer assigned to that program, and they provide liaison services between the community organizations and the DPOs that are supervising those cases. When we're assigning cases, we try to do it based on their needs. We put them through an assessment, through the COMPASS assessment, which gives us their highest criminogenic needs. As we know, their cognitive behavioral is one of the top criminogenic needs. So most of the clients that are going through this unit prior to getting off probation, one of the requirements is for them to complete the T4C program. We also utilize a fatherhood program for those that a lot of our clients are young fathers. So we utilize a fatherhood program which develops parenting skills, decision-making skills, and assists them with just basic life skills. As far as outcomes, the outcomes are you know, it's difficult. This is an extremely difficult population to supervise. They're very impulsive. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of trauma. So we celebrate the small victories, and you know, just try to assist them throughout the process of getting their life back together and integrating back into the community. And that's what we do.
Great. Thanks so much, Gabe. It's really helpful to provide you know, some real-world context around how best to kind of provide supervision to young adults involved in the justice system and how to tailor responses to their distinct needs. I just want to remind everybody that there's the Q&A box, so please type in your questions. I think we're going to transition to our next speaker, but we'll have lots of time for Q&A at the end. So thanks, Gabe, and I'm going to turn it over now to Alejandra Martinez, who's going to talk about her experience as a young adult in the justice system. So Alejandra?
Thank you. Well, my name is Alejandra, and when I was 18 years old, I was a few weeks away from graduating from high school. I got arrested and I got convicted of a felony. Fortunately, I was able to bail out, and well, of course, with the support of my parents and yeah, like friends. But when I was convicted, it was really rough for me. It was my first conviction as an adult. I found it hard to, I just graduated from high school, and I found it hard to obtain employment. Being on Tei probation, I feel like what was helpful was being on low-risk probation, thanks to all the letters of recommendation that I had from people from the community, from my school, from my counselors. So having less restriction on low-risk probation was definitely a benefit for me, because it lowered the chances of me, I guess, violating, violating, I guess, my probation. I was able to be more free, like go on job hunts and things like that, although it was very hard for me to obtain employment. And for months, I felt like I was stuck. I wanted to go to college, so I signed up for community college, not here in the city, because I felt like if I would have gone to community college here in the city, I would have seen people that I knew and probably messed up. Also, money was a barrier. I ended up going to Skyline Community College, although it was expensive, transportation was expensive for me. I was still searching for a job. I had to depend on my mom, and my mom, I'm grateful that I had her to be there to support me during that time, because if I would have not had her, I don't know where I would have been. I would have probably, ended up making money, I don't know, illegally, because it was such a barrier for me. So after a few months of going to school, and I was blessed to find CHALK, Communities in Harmony Advocating for Learning in Kids, and that organization gave me employment. After a few months of being with CHALK, I found out about a program called Project Rebound. It's a program at SF State that helped me actually get into SF State. When I found out about the program, I was still going to community college, although I found out that they would be able to pay for my class, pay for one class, while in the process of them helping me get into SF State. So I dropped my classes at community college, and I ended up joining the program, Project Rebound, which is the program that helps people that have been in the justice system get into SF State. So that program paid for my class and supported me throughout my journey of getting into college, basically, and it really was very beneficial for me. I'm so blessed to have found CHALK and Project Rebound, because I would have been lost if I would have never crossed paths with them. It's actually very difficult for a young person who is barely getting into adulthood and who also has been convicted of a felony to find employment and education, because all these barriers, the policies that they have, just make it really, really hard for someone to actually, like, I don't know, succeed. Like, it seems like all of the barriers that that you have to go through kind of make it impossible for, like, let's say, like, payments that you have, like court fees, restitution, things like that. Like, how is a young person who does not have employment, who has this felony on their record, gonna get that money to pay all these fines and fees? And I'm not talking about $20. I'm talking about like $2,000, $3,000. So it's just really, really difficult. And if it wasn't for programs like Chalk and Project Rebound that luckily we have here in San Francisco, it would just be like really, really difficult to not get back into illegal activity and probably, like, you know, go back into recidivism, back into the system because of a violation of your probation, because you get arrested, you know, trying to make money the only way that you can. And it's not, I honestly, in my opinion, it's not a criminal issue, it's a poverty issue. So we need to, I feel like we need to find, like, we need to create more organizations that do help youth who are involved with the system, are convicted of crimes, to like employ them and help them get back into school. Another thing also is financial aid. That's just another barrier. When I finally got admitted into SF State, the first semester I did not get financial aid because of the felony that I had. So it was just extremely difficult, and I'm blessed to have my mom there. But like, if I didn't, I would probably not even continue, like, to be at SF State. Luckily, I completed my probation. I got my felony reduced to a misdemeanor, but even with that, it's still a barrier. I recently applied for another job, and I went through 2 interview process, got the job. They really liked me, and once it was time for me to do fingerprints, they denied me because of my background. So it's really, really difficult. All these barriers placed on you when you do have a conviction. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Alejandra. I think we really, really appreciate you being here. I think, you know, youth and young adult voice is so often missing from these conversations, and it's so helpful to hear kind of firsthand from your experience kind of what made a difference, what barriers you encountered, and kind of some things to think about for states and local jurisdictions who really want to move the needle on this population. Just, you know, some of the things I heard, you know, first of all was the importance of parental support and kind of, you know, advocating for yourself in terms of kind of getting on that lower risk caseload. Secondly, around the impact of collateral consequences, particularly related to education and employment, but then also the court fees and restitution. I think that's a really important issue that states and locals need to kind of be thinking about in terms of, you know, what's the young adult's ability to actually repay those, and are there more kind of creative ways to go about doing that and having the young person take responsibility. And third is around the importance of community organizations and kind of advocacy groups to kind of provide that support in the community for young adults and help provide them with avenues. Before we transition to Molly, Alejandra, I had one question come in specifically for you. You talked about a couple of barriers around, you know, your job search, but do you mind kind of talking about any other kind of barriers that you encountered while job hunting, and why you think employers may be apprehensive to hire someone with a criminal record?
well, yeah, like in job applications, most of the time, I know they do have the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor? I feel like people don't want, employers don't want, people that have been in the justice system to be working for them. They might not be trusting of the person. I feel like, yeah, it's just discrimination. Even if you have completed your probation, and I feel like it's also the way that the media portrays young people of color. It's just really, it's I'm sorry, just that question, I feel like automatically, once they see that you have checked yes, they kind of, don't even consider you because they don't want to hire, a convict, or they might not be, I feel like they feel like they would not be able to rely on that person, or it's just kind of they judge without getting to really give an opportunity or know the person.
Absolutely. No, I think thank you so much for that, for those comments and that response. I think that's something, we've seen from some of our work across the country is, having that one question, having such an arbitrary or kind of hard and fast system that if you kind of check the box that you have that one has a criminal conviction and one is put into a different category, that really kind of leaves no room for more subjective measures to get to know the person and see if they would actually be a really good fit for the position. And I think you brought up another really important point that kind of affects young adults and then individuals with criminal records is kind of this perception that they're unreliable. I think we see it across the country in terms of, employers being less hesitant or more hesitant rather to hire young adults because they may perceive them as maybe not showing up on time or maybe not having experience or understanding kind of workplace norms and things like that. That's why job readiness programs are so important, but then also individuals with criminal records or who have been involved in the justice system, they may be perceived as that as well. So thank you so much, and I think that actually is a really great segue to Molly, who's going to kind of talk through some of those issues as well as kind of how best to engage young people who have been involved in the justice system and how to kind of connect them with workforce readiness skills and transitional employment and so on. So thank you so much, Alejandra, and I'm going to turn it over to Molly.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for including us, and it's a privilege to be here with you all, and Alejandra and Gabe, thank you so much. So ROCA is based in Massachusetts, and our motto is less jail, more future. Our mission is to disrupt the cycle of incarceration and poverty by helping young people transform their lives. And our theory of change, which will sound really familiar not only to what Gabe's talking about and Alejandra, but also the paper and recommendations, that young people engaged in long-term positive relationships who have an opportunity to work on changing their behavior, developing skills, life skills, education, employment, can in fact succeed. The Young Men's Program, which we're focused on, is really focused on that group that the Council of State Government talks about, that, although lots of young people, unfortunately, will be involved in the juvenile and adult criminal justice system, many of them will just naturally of age desist or stop that behavior. But our organization is really focused on the young men who really are headed on for continued involvement in violence and future incarceration, and who are in fact not engaging in educational programming and not connected to the workforce system. And they, 17 to 24, all assessed at high risk, matching criminal justice risk assessments, minimal to no work history, and essentially not ready for change and not interested in any help. They're referred to the organization in a number of different ways, and if we think a person meets our criteria, they're in the program, whether they want to be or not. Most of them are not so happy about being engaged. They're not mandated to be here, but through our relationships over time, we engage them. A couple of things that we think are important when you look at how to connect and how to engage people is really looking at the stages of behavior change. And we, as you can see, we have a little chart here. We kind of created some words that we could remember. Pre-contemplation being, no, I don't want to change. Contemplation, maybe. Planning is getting ready. Action is really, can I do something different? And we think sustaining is if more than 51% of the time you could choose something that's working for you, that's good. And we also built relapse into the model. And as we go through our program, we'll talk a little bit about this frame of the stages of change, not only where young people are in their readiness to change or not. Secondly, because you can't change anybody, although I wish we could get rid of drugs and guns, what we can do is understand these stages of change. We can wrap around young people. We can help our partners in court, in prison, police departments, governments understand that change takes time, and we can ensure that we allow people multiple opportunities to succeed. And then the other is we both informally and formally have a behavioral health component. Not only are we providing people with multiple opportunities to learn to change and participate, but we have recently been working with Mass General's Community Pride Clinic, and we've developed a simple curriculum on behavioral health focused on emotional regulation so that we can help young people understand that what they think and what they feel and how they behave are in fact three different things, and that they can have a lot more choice and freedom in their life. And this is something we're in our first year of implementation and finding very successful. Our program has four main components: relentless outreach and follow-up. We just kind of go after people, bang on the door, follow up, find their friends, find the people they're hanging with. We'll chase people around, keep inviting them in. When young people come and they do well, then they leave because they don't want to be there, or it's too hard, or they're frustrated, or the streets are pulling them in. We go back and back and back. Secondly, we think that young people change in the context of relationships, no different than our children or any of us. We have our intensive case management model is built on a transformational relationship, and we have one youth worker to 25 young people, and we use data and research, not only a lot of data about what young people are doing and not doing, but what staff are doing and not doing, and try to look at those things together. Our programming, as I said before, is based on the stages of change, so you can do a little bit of it. You can come for 3 weeks, you can get mad at us, you can disappear. We'll go find you, get you back in until you can stay and until you're ready to do what you need to do. We have life skills, education and pre-vocational training, employment, and all kinds of components. And a couple of examples I think that are helpful to understand. For example, our transitional employment program, young people get paid real wages, so it's minimum wage. However, it averages 15 to 18 months for young people to put 60 days of work in a row. We think you need to do that before you're going to succeed in the workforce. We're seeing about 18 to 24 months time period for young people to sustain a significant behavior change. And again, because young people start not necessarily because they're ready to change, and we go out and do outreach and bring young people in and invite them in, we've developed really kind of get your life together school that'll allow young people to come for a few days, as I said, disappear, get angry with us, come back when they're ready, or if they, sometimes people start succeeding and that's really scary, they disappear, we get them back in until the intrinsic motivation or the desire is there to make changes. The fourth component is our engaged institution strategy, which I like to call marrying institutions. Police, government, probation, sheriff's departments, health systems, local store owners, everybody and anybody that we can work with, that we build relationships in such a way that we can talk honestly about what's going on, that we can wrap around young people and get them the supports and resources and network they so desperately need. We can get them multiple chances, and that those relationships drive us as an institution to do better as well. We said another key component to the model is we're very data-driven. We sort of based on the framework of community corrections. And you'll see here, I won't go through this, but our idea is in the end to reduce incarceration and get people to sustain employment. And we look at a number of interim benchmarks and then outcomes to see if we're on track or off track. Kind of data we collect, we have a central intake and risk assessment. Young people can see their own data, by the way. We look at changes over time. We look at how staff are doing, young people are doing. We look at engagement, workforce assessment, educational assessments, employment records, criminal involvement records, and staff supervision. And we look at this data to make sure that, in fact, what we're doing is helpful. If it's not, we need to change it. And it holds us accountable to the young person and gives us the privilege to engage with them, because it's a really hard thing to do to make changes. Just a sense of our outcomes last fiscal year, we had 659 young men across the state in different stages of our model, 2-year intensive and 2-year follow-up. We were able to retain 84%, which is, since they're not mandated, that's important to understand, I think. And then those are some interim outcomes and long-term outcomes around reduction of future arrest and long-term employment. I think a couple of things just to go focus on a few key things, and then I'll stop. How do you engage people? So it was really critical for us to develop a process that allowed engagement over a period of time and that allowed young people to come in and out of programming until they're ready to succeed. The second piece was around employment and education, is really being able to present young people with learning opportunities based on where they are. Sadly, the majority of the young people in the organization are reading at a 3rd and 4th grade level, some at a 5th and 6th, and a few are ready for a high school diploma or an equivalent. So we had to figure out, well, how do we do programming that's meaningful? So you base it on things you need to do for work, or programming that allows you to come and then if you have a hard time, leave and then come back. The same thing with employment. We found the biggest challenge is that people really didn't have the skills they needed to work. They were sort of way before the stage of what would you like to do the rest of your life, but really what does it take to go to work and to feel good about that and to be able to succeed at work. So we worked on that. And then clearly our CBT curriculum is really designed very simple. Youth workers can teach young people, crew supervisors, young people are picking it up. They're very short sessions, they're repetitive. There's all kinds of skill-based activities that young people can remember so they can really learn to kind of understand, well, just because I think something and I feel something doesn't mean I have to do what I always do. So those have been real key lessons, and it continues to be our great privilege to work with the young people and our partners. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Molly. I think, again, it's really helpful to hear kind of a practical example on the ground and kind of all the impressive, work and outcomes that you're seeing. But I think, to your lessons learned and key takeaways, I heard a couple of things. First of all is the importance of engagement and kind of meeting the young person where they are, and the importance of kind of providing second, third, fourth chances, really understanding that they're going through this process of change, and secondly, that change does take time. It's not going to happen overnight, and this kind of support system needs to be developed around, wraparound services and kind of to support the youth and young adults. And then the third around the relationships and partnerships. So Molly, I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit more about the relationships and partnerships that you've been able to bridge. I think that's one of the barriers often to serving young adults well, is that, as you talked about, they're involved in these different service systems, and these systems aren't necessarily talking to each other. And, as you mentioned, there are young adults who are ready to go on to post-secondary, and there's young adults who need to really kind of focus in on their literacy skills. And so, how do you kind of work with these various partners? How do you create a collaborative environment? How do you hold each other accountable? It'd be great to hear more about that.
Right, and just to answer, I saw one question was, someone was sort of saying, do the young people feel we're obtrusive? And the answer is absolutely yes. And I completely respect, ultimately people have to decide to change themselves. But when we think that when young people have suffered so much, are in such harm's way, often causing harm themselves, have no supports, they have no networks around them, that it's really critical that we go to the, if you will, the umpteenth degree to let them know that there's another way. And over time, as young people start to succeed, one of the key things is you all never gave up on me, even when I hated you and I told you to go away, over and over and over and over again. And I appreciate that it kind of borders on the question was raised around self-determination. I appreciate that it borders on it, that encroaching that. On the other hand, if you've suffered that much and no one ever let you know you were worth all that, I mean, ideally you have parents who don't give up on you. Ideally, you come from a place where there isn't the kind of harm that's taken place. And so we absolutely, it's probably borders on stalking, but relentless is legal. And it's a key component of the model, and we just kind of own that. One of the things that we figured out, not in the easiest way, because I myself was a pain in the you-know-what youth worker, winging around, fighting the system, protecting the kids, is that, most people, most of these young people, the people in their lives are with systems. They're with probation or police or government, unfortunately. The engagement is really negative, and when young people are really in harm's way, they're very active in violent behavior, they're carrying guns, knives, what we want to do is show them there's another way. We have to work with the other people who are going to help them make that change. And so we started to look at this differently and said we have to be in relationship with these institutions and governments. That's also where the resources are, and together we can do something different. And we looked at it no different than a young person or adult or myself for that matter when I don't want to change, is we're just going to stay at it until we have to. We cannot do this without police partners. It's a fine line. They have a job and so do we. But we can't do that. Who else is out there to help get guns out of their hands and keep them alive? If they're in and out of court, we have to have, really good and growing and maturing relationships with probation and judges and district attorneys. And so we just came to understand it. We came to a point where we understood it. We had a vision for that, and we just go at it as relentlessly. I think police officers, chiefs, city managers, commissioners, they'll tell you, oh my God, they're as relentless with us as they are those kids, because we can't do it any other way. And so through that, we're able to put safety around young people. If there's a critical incident, we can intervene and try to not have another incident happen. We've been able to get young people to, really meet their court requirements. We've been able to address gang issues, employment issues, and what no different than what we all hope for our children is a network and support and opportunity. And it's through those relationships that we can build the network and the support and the opportunity. Now, easier said than done, but well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, that's a very important point that, no one system or organization can do it all on their own, and it really requires a village. And I think, to your point, helping individuals and systems and branches of government kind of see the role that they play in this issue, and the importance of it being a public safety issue, a civil rights issue, just kind of general what's in the best interest of our youth and our community issue, really can make a compelling case and get people on board. So thank you. we have a bunch of questions coming in. Encourage everybody to kind of continue to send them in. I'm going to go to Gabe for this one. You mentioned that that your caseloads are set up by risk level. Can you talk a little bit about how high risk, medium risk, and low risk are determined? What assessments and tools you might use, and how do you, something I'd be interested in is how you factor in or how you may make accommodations for specific young adult factors. Like some risk assessments look at the age of first offense as a predictor, and so, since these are young adults, how does that how do you take that into account when you're determining the risk level?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we use a tool called the Compass, and it's I believe it's a 136 question tool, and it's based on a self-report, criminal history, and it gives us a score that determines whether or not they're high, medium, or low. As you said before, a lot of these tools weren't validated on this population, so that's how we go about assigning risk.
I see. And is there any specialized training that's provided to officers based on whether they have a high, medium, or low risk caseload? Kind of specific things or areas of focus to differentiate kind of their approach towards these different groups?
Yeah, well, all of our officers are trained in motivational interviewing. We have several officers that are trained in cognitive behavioral program, the T4C program. That really, they're trained in how to specifically build a professional alliance with the 18 to 25-year-old population, understanding that there are different developmental, there's differences between the normal adult population and this population. So, yeah, those, the motivational interviewing training, the cognitive behavioral skills training, we have a set of training tools called the carry guides that all of our officers are trained in that kind of help them skill build with this population. And I think that's something that's not really talked about really, is that in order for us to get the change that we want, we have to understand that the population we're working with, is so skill deficient, our officers are oftentimes the ones that need to practice the skill building with them. They're encouraged and they're actually required to be involved in role playing, in skill building, and in going through these carry guide, they're called BITS, 15-minute skill building exercises, because oftentimes we expect the most out of individuals who have the least amount of skills, and then we punish them when they don't meet our goals, and it's unfair. So the officers are trained in how to skill build and how to increase the intrinsic motivation of the clients.
Great. And just one other question. We kind of talked with Molly about the cross-systems nature of this work, and that a lot of young adults and youth in general are dually involved in the juvenile and child welfare systems. Can you talk a little bit, do you have a relationship with the child welfare system and what that kind of looks like in terms of kind of managing youth who might be involved in both systems and kind of accommodating the needs of those young adults?
Well, we have, San Francisco is unique in that it has its own separate juvenile and adult departments with their own separate chiefs. So we don't have much interaction with those systems.
Got it. Great. So I'm going to send this question that we've got to Alejandra. Thank you again for sharing your story. And wanted to get your thoughts. We're talking a lot about what, how to respond and how to better support young adults when they become involved in the justice system, whether it's juvenile or adult. But it would be great to get your thoughts on, what communities can do to help keep kids and young adults in particular out of the justice system. From your experience, what do you think is important and necessary to do that?
From my experience, I believe that employment and education is very important. When I was a junior in high school, I had a teacher who taught U.S. history, and she taught us not based on the textbook, but she brought her own curriculum, and she taught us like what we call like college U.S. history, and it really, I believe it changed my views on just like society. Unfortunately, I was involved in the system afterwards, but I feel like that teacher really made an impact on me. I am very passionate about fighting for the rights of low-income people of color, and I know like that's like most of the population in jail is low-income people of color. So I believe like education, like at Chalk, me and my coordinator are developing a justice program that is going to provide information, resources, and support to youth who are involved with the system. But we're also going to go into juvenile hall and provide workshops like the school to prison pipeline, prison industrial complex, and just teach them how like the system now, like our justice system, goes all the way back to slavery. I feel like that is something really important, because when I found out about like just all of this, like it really like just opened my eyes, and I feel like that would definitely motivate youth to want to stay out the system, because when you're involved in the system, people are making money off of you. No one else is making money. I mean, you're not making money, but people, like, are making money off of you, whether it's the judge, whether it's your lawyer, whether it's, as the whole system is making money off of you. So I feel like just raising awareness on just the system, and I feel like that would definitely motivate youth to want to stay out the system, because that's what kind of like motivates me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was just going to say, I think having young people like yourself kind of talk about their experience and kind of serve as role models and kind of mentors to young people who might be kind of considering some bad decisions is, from some of the work that the Justice Center has done, we've seen that that's so important. And the importance, like you mentioned, in engaging young people in education and giving them the skills and the tools that they need to be successful in life moving forward. And I think to your other point, the importance of relationships and relationships with caring adults, whether it's a teacher or a mentor or a pastor, whoever it is, just having somebody, an adult or a person there to help provide that guidance and support is so critical. So thank you so much for that, Alejandra. And I just wanted to kick a question to Molly, actually, piggybacking on that. We had a question come in about how you all measure transformational relationships with your youth participants and what outcomes and impacts you've seen in this area specifically.
So there are a couple things I could, first of all, we sort of track engagement between the youth worker and the young person. We do different kinds of pattern analysis about young person's engagement and other things compared to contacts between the youth worker. We train young, youth workers in kind of motivational interviewing and CBT and outreach and engagement so that we can kind of connect to young people. The back end, we're really looking at the other outcomes though. So we just think it's part of what we do. We are currently involved in several evaluations through the state's Pay for Success project. We are involved in a study of the Urban Institute about reduction of incarceration and increased employment over time. And we're also working with APT Associates on an implementation and outcomes evaluation. And interimly, like each year, we kind of look at the data and the research and try to connect what we do to changes in young people or not. So we've got several levels of that we're looking at.
Absolutely, thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, I think some of these more qualitative measures, it's just interesting to hear how, kind of what metrics are used to kind of assess the extent of which certain things are happening. So that's really helpful to hear more about. One other question for you, Molly. We talked a little bit about the importance of housing, kind of young adults are transitioning to independence and they need to be kind of self-sufficient. How does housing and transportation, those two pieces kind of fit into your model, given that they're so important and that young adults are kind of just often expected to transition on their own and be self-sufficient and find housing and be okay and be able to show up for work on time, get to work and show up. Can you talk a little bit about how those elements fit into your model?
So a lot of our outreach, a lot of our efforts in the beginning are out. It's not like, you walk in and there are 100 kids sitting in the center. So we go to people's homes, we go to the street, we go find people over and over and over and over again. In the beginning for transitional employment, we'll bring young people in. We do a lot of reminder calls. We help them get bus passes and those kinds of things when they're ready. At some point, we got to help them learn how to get places on their own or they'll never succeed. The housing thing is a full-time job. We're really focused, again, on this group that's not doing well. So we're constantly helping young people negotiate housing. There's a great transitional housing program in the area that, every year asks us for a support letter for their grant, which we're glad to do, but they don't want any of our young people because they're not ready. And they kind of blow out of structured programs. If they could do well in a housing or transitional housing, they wouldn't need to be at ROCA. Because again, if young people could come to ROCA and go to training every day, they don't need to be here. They should be at the great training program, a less intensive intervention, get more skills-based, and move on to the great things. So we spend a lot of time navigating that with young people. They're often going from place to place. But as they stabilize, then begin to help them work on, okay, by the way, we got to figure out how you're going to live the rest of your life. So we're constantly working on those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all kind of, helping young people, kind of get to a place where they can be on their own and be self-sufficient and how to best provide them with the tools and supports to do that. I actually wanted to kick that question to Gabe as well, just to better understand, kind of the relationship that you all at the probation department might have with housing and helping young adults in particular find and secure stable housing. How does that work, fit into your caseload and the support you provide?
Yeah, well, as you know, San Francisco housing market is probably one of the hardest in the country. And, you couple that with the fact that this demographic, it's extremely hard to get them stable and to get them to make decent decisions as it relates to housing stability. We work closely, with our community partners to, try to, find decent housing support, transitional housing for this population, but it's extremely difficult. We make referrals through our community services and assessment center, the Tailoring housing clinic, but it's anybody that works in the field. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think especially for urban centers like San Francisco, like New York City, I mean, as you mentioned, it's hard for any young person to find stable and secure housing, not to mention, a young person who may have a criminal conviction or, justice involvement and be kind of less likely to be able to find that.
Yeah, I mean, and there are options. We do have probation beds, but it comes, and at no cost to the probation client. However, the cost is that they need to participate and comply with the housing rules and and demonstrate probation compliance. And oftentimes, it's extremely difficult. Both, we can put them into housing programs, but there are, issues related to relationships, related to substance abuse, related to violence, that they don't stay housed for very long.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to go to another question that we received around tracking outcomes for youth and young adults and how best to comprehensively track those outcomes, maybe like what are those indicators, and talking a little bit about data sharing. I wanted to just throw out a couple of resources from the Justice Center around this issue, in terms of when we're talking about, measuring outcomes for youth and young adults. We released a issue brief a year or two ago around measuring recidivism. We did a 50-state survey on the extent to which each state kind of measure how and the extent to which they measure recidivism, and provided recommendations for the types of data that should be collected, what recidivism looks like. Is it rearrest? Is it reincarceration? Our recommendation is that multiple points of recidivism are collected, and also that this data is disaggregated by risk level and by other youth and young adult characteristics. But there are several other recommendations in that issue brief around the collection of recidivism data. And then we also released an issue brief a few months ago in November around education outcomes, education and vocational outcomes. So we did a similar survey with all 50 states to see kind of what youth outcomes, what these other youth outcomes, particularly around education and vocational training, different states were collecting, and put forth recommendations for what data should be collected in these areas. And so, any system kind of who wants to make sure that they're collecting a comprehensive range of indicators, I would suggest those as kind of first steps. We also know that there are other indicators that we want to look at in terms of behavioral health and kind of transitioning to independence and what those look like. And Molly talked a little bit about, transformational relationships and some of the other indicators that Broca's looking at. But those are my, kind of suggestions. In terms of data sharing, we always hear that as kind of a big barrier. I guess I'd be interested from Gabe and Molly, from your experience, what recommendations would you have for a state or a local jurisdiction interested in, that wants to kind of improve data sharing across different agencies?
I'm not sure. Am I online?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, hi. I mean, you know what? I mean, we're never going to get any better if we don't start to share data. So the most important thing is for states to figure out how to share data. I mean, I just think I get that it's complicated. I know that we need to figure out how we protect individuals. I think that's really important. Our Pay for Success project, we're working with 4 branches of government and 9 government entities. It's very complicated, but you know, governments, I'm sure Gabe can tell you this, governments don't share data so well between each other. So in this era where we really need, you know, this time where we want to figure out, are we helping people? How do we know it? Truth in what we're doing, accountability. If we don't get better at collecting data, we certainly do when we send our kids to school. We look at their report cards, we look at how schools are going. I mean, I just think the most important thing states can do is figure out how to do it and to get the yes, as opposed to the starting point and desperately held on to point of we can't. We've got to figure it out.
No, I 100% agree. You know, data sharing has always been an issue, and even as it relates around recidivism, everybody has, you know, a different mission. So recidivism to the Adult Probation Department is going to be extremely different than recidivism to the DA's office and recidivism to the Public Defender's office. So I think first you need to, as it relates to recidivism and data sharing in that way, I think there needs to be some uniformity as to what you know, the definitions of different things are, and you know, like Molly said, coming up with a way to share that across, you know, with each state.
Absolutely. I think, Gabe, that's a really important point, you know, especially when we're talking about recidivism, but across the board, you know, ensuring that there's common definitions. That's a really important kind of step in terms of making sure that the same data is being collected and everybody sort of, you know, is measuring the same thing the same way. Right. You know, a lot of what we're talking about, you know, what we talk about a lot in the issue briefs and just kind of from our work generally is also the importance of kind of data sharing agreements and kind of laying out what that looks like. There's a lot of, you know, some examples from different states and jurisdictions across the country in terms of specifying what data is going to be shared, how often, with whom. You know, we know that there are, especially when we're talking about youth and young adults, that there are data privacy mandates and kind of stipulations that need to be followed, and so making sure that those are clear and that everything's sort of like laid out and formalized through a written agreement is a really helpful way to go. But at the same time, we need to move forward with this as fast as we can, and sometimes it takes a long time to get these agreements in place. So to the extent that it's possible to share data without violating these privacy laws, you know, really encourage and hope that states and communities are starting to do that. We have, you know, only a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any last questions, we hope you'll type them in now. Just wanted to go to Alejandra really quickly about Project Rebound. I believe that's a San Francisco specific initiative. Is that correct? And
correct.
Okay. And I know you talked a little bit about it. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you think is helpful for folks to know?
Well, they are at City College and at San Francisco State University. If you're eligible based on your, well, you would be eligible for both, but they'll determine what college you're eligible for based on your transcripts. They do let you one semester, one class a semester, like while you're in the process of being admitted to the university. They'll let you attend for free. They'll pay for your, they'll help you get books, supply, like whatever you need. They give you food vouchers, and yeah, like they're really supportive throughout the process of you getting admitted into SF State. And once you are admitted, you can always go to them, like if you need like a food voucher, BART passes, things like that. Like they'll be with you throughout your college experience for support.
Great, thanks so much. And it's so helpful to hear more about the program and kind of to know that there are initiatives like that out there that are providing this type of support to young adults. Thank you so much. So with that, I think we are going to draw the webinar to a close, but I wanted to thank all of our presenters, Gabe, Alejandra, Molly, so much for your time and expertise. It was so helpful to hear more about your work, and I know all the participants on the webinar really thank you for your comments. And then just wanted to remind everybody on the webinar, and hope you'll sign up for our project updates through the link that will be provided to you. So again, thank you everyone, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.